One of the things that have fascinated me over the years is the brain's ability to cope with various situations without the need to actively set those coping skills in motion. Nostalgia is one of those coping mechanisms that I'm sure everyone has felt at least once in their lifetime. Today, I'm going over the not so warming side of nostalgia and why I find it personally interesting. I am Jozial, and if you enjoy this video, please support it by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. I plan on making more videos like this outside of my animations, because animations take a long time to produce, and honestly, sometimes I need a break from them, so I figured it would be more beneficial if I work on something and be productive with my time. I don't always like to subject myself to ideas and thoughts that lead to hopelessness and loss of hope, but as a human, I have a morbid curiosity to those things. So please, just keep in mind, life is not all bad, and there are silver linings to existence. This is just one of those things we have to come to grips with and move forward. Okay, now that I got that intro out of the way, let's go ahead and begin. With the weather becoming colder, I noticed every year there's this weird thing that happens with my mind. Once it gets to this time of year, I begin to experience this serene, almost calming mentality that's sometimes overshadowed by extreme depression and anxiety about what was. It's not every day, and sometimes it's more intense than others, but I can't help but feel unsettled when the latter happens. I know I'm not alone in this, so I guess that's a plus, but I've always wondered why. I get excited every year about this weather. Everything slows down, and people tend to spend more time indoors, and I just overall feel safe. Why do I and millions of people experience this? Seasonal affective disorder is a very common disorder that affects over 3 million people in the US, and it's believed to be triggered by the lack of sunlight produced, which in turn affects the serotonin levels in your brain. A little side note, I just kind of think it's funny that seasonal affective disorder is an acronym for SAD, so I don't know if that's intentional, but if it was, that's actually hilarious. Anyway. Sometimes it's called seasonal depression, but whatever you want to call it, it's a very real thing and can have severe effects on your mental state. But why am I talking about it in a video about nostalgia? It'll all tie in soon, I promise. For most people, seasonal affective disorder activates during the winter and then subsides during the summer, but for some, it's actually the opposite. I find this particularly interesting because I think there's a reason that goes deeper than just surface level as for why. This is where nostalgia comes in. The word nostalgia was originally formed by the Greeks. Even the original word has two sides. The first is nostos, meaning homecoming, and the second is algos, meaning sorrow or despair. So, traditionally, nostalgia was once used to describe a debilitating medical condition expressing extreme longing for one's home. Nowadays, it's typically used to define the fuzziness we feel when we reminisce on a time we found pleasant and comforting. So, the definition has drastically changed over the years since it was first implemented. The biggest question is why? I don't think there is a definite answer, but I do have some thoughts that might shed light on why. We feel nostalgic about something for a simple reason. Let's say when you were a child, every year, you went to your grandparents' house for Christmas. Maybe they had a particular candle burning or their carpet was a certain texture that stood out to you. And let's say every year you had the most amazing time of your life opening presents. You were visiting your family and everything felt absolutely perfect. Then we fast forward 10 or 15 years and a lot has changed. You are now married and you tend to spend most of your holidays with your own family. Your grandmother has passed away, and ever since then, your family doesn't get together like they used to. You're walking around a store and your nose picks up on a rather familiar smell. A wave of old memories hits you like a ton of bricks, stopping you in your tracks. You can see your grandmother sitting on the same couch she always sat on, and your aunts and uncles all gathered around drinking eggnog and laughing. You and your cousins are trying to be sneaky so you can take the slightest little peek at their presents, but of course, each time you get caught, a sense of comfort and bliss comes over you just remembering what was. Then the realization sets in that you will never get to experience that again. I know that was a very specific example, but I hope that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. I actually experienced this the other day, and that's what led me to make this video. I was sitting on the couch with my girlfriend watching Good Luck Charlie of all things, and it was the first time I'd seen it in years, and then the intro played. A wave of memories hit me, and I remembered me and my siblings sitting on the couch watching it. I enjoyed the feeling, but directly afterwards, I was quickly reminded that I'll never be able to go back. For the rest of this universe's existence, I will never get to go back to that age. Watching Good Luck Charlie, eating cereal, and getting ready to play Pokemon Fire Red on my Game Boy Advance SP. The most reasonable thing to say is, well, life moves on. And that is true, but you can still think fondly about these memories. It's important not to dwell on them, but it's easier said than done, especially if the future seems bleak and uncertain. Currently, nostalgia is actually seen as a positive, which I think to an extent it can be. It allows us to cope with current stressful situations, placing ourselves into a time that was once less stressful. There are instances in which nostalgia can be a negative. I like to think about it as passive and aggressive nostalgia. Aggressive nostalgia is what we've been talking about right now, when you actively think of things that bring you back to a better time, whereas passive nostalgia is when the nostalgia you may feel from something directly affects your opinion on that thing. These aren't terms I've read or anything, it's just I've made them up to better describe all of this. So passive nostalgia can be a negative because it can cause you to not take into account the actual quality of certain things, but instead use your nostalgic feelings to guide your opinion on it. I actually heard something from Jacksepticeye a while ago, and it actually made me think of this as well. I've looked for the clip for a long time, but I actually couldn't find it, so it goes something like this. A fan made a comment that said Jacksepticeye has changed and he was a lot better back in the day, and he responded, no, that time in your life was just better and you enjoyed it a lot more, so everything you watched you enjoyed a lot more. I know that's not the exact quote, but he was basically saying that they were much younger and life didn't seem as dreary and bleak, so it causes your memories to automatically think everything was better because of nostalgia. Which I think is an amazing point. Nostalgia is a tool. Wait, I thought the point of this video was to point out the negative side to it. And well, I mean, it is, but that's not just my point. Nostalgia also brings us together. It's the reason why we see people participating in historical reenactments. It's people's shared nostalgia for historical periods of past times. If you're not careful, you can end up dwelling in the past so much that it seems your future doesn't contain anything of value compared to what you experienced in the past. It will just be a half-baked attempt to recreate feelings you once felt, but always falling short of expectation. This can also lead to existential dread and the feeling that you are caged in a point in time you can't escape, which is true, but that's not always a bad thing. With the weather turning cold and Christmas approaching, I think it's most important to remember, life isn't always bad. And the opposite is also true. No matter what is going to happen in the future, you can't change it. What's going to happen in the future is going to happen. The past is also similar. You can't change the past. You can't also live in the past. Live in the present and enjoy it. When you're older and you can't move like you used to, and your joints ache from just getting out of bed, being young is going to be nostalgic to you. But by then it will be too late to go back. And that's the depressing side of nostalgia. Thanks.